Ladies and gentlemen, you ever look in the mirror and not recognize the woman staring back? Not because she's changed, but because she survived. She's been through fire, and she don't wear the flames on her skin. No, she carries them in her eyes. A woman like that, she ain't broken. She's blessed. See, we like to celebrate the mountaintops, but it's the valleys, those deep, dark, tear-soaked valleys that build us, that rebuild us. That rebuild do waste, not your pain, not your past, not your past, not your heartbreak. All of it, he uses it. You thought it was over. When life hit hard, when they left, when the doors closed, when you were on your knees asking, why me, Lord? He was already writing the next chapter, the chapter where you rise. You see, God doesn't call the flawless. He calls the faithful. The woman who's crawling through the chaos, still whispering, God, I trust you. That's the one he anoints. That's the one he crowns. Don't be fooled by what you lost. Pay attention to what you gain. Wisdom, strength, resilience. You didn't break down, you broke through. That brokenness, that was holy ground. That was where heaven met your hurt. That's where the blessing began. You want to know power? Look at a woman who walked through hell and held on to heaven. That's power. That's glory in motion. That's grace wrapped in skin. You've been called, chosen. Even in your silence, God heard every cry. Even in your stillness, he was moving, lining things up, healing places you didn't even know were bleeding. Don't be ashamed of your scars. Don't hide your story. God's light shines brightest through the cracks. The enemy tried to break you, but all he did was position you. You're not just a survivor, you're a warrior, you're a walking testimony. So, walk tall, woman of God. Let the world see what happens when broken meets blessed, when mercy meets mess, when grace meets grit. Because your story, it ain't over. Not by a long shot. God's just getting started. That pain doesn't disqualify purpose, it proves it. Pain is not the sign that you've lost your way. It's often the evidence that you're walking directly through the fire that forges your calling. When you're in the thick of it, when your heart is heavy, your spirit tired, and the silence from heaven feels deafening, it's easy to think you've been forgotten. But purpose doesn't always come wrapped in clarity. Sometimes it shows up in the form of heartbreak, loss, disappointment, or betrayal. And in those moments when everything inside you wants to give up, the fact that you keep showing up, that you're still breathing, still believing, that proves you were made for something more. Pain stretches the soul. It deepens compassion. It sharpens vision. It teaches lessons no textbook ever could. It reveals what truly matters. Purpose isn't born in the spotlight. It's forged in the shadows. When the applause is gone and it's just you and God, that's where the roots grow deep. You learn who you are, what you carry, who you're becoming. God doesn't sidestep brokenness. He steps into it. He doesn't discard the wounded. He calls them. Because a woman who has known deep pain and still chooses love, still chooses grace, still chooses to rise, that woman is dangerous to the enemy and precious to God. She's not disqualified. She's distinguished. Your pain didn't cancel the plan. It confirmed it. It means there's something inside you the world needs to see, something hell tried to crush, but heaven already redeemed. Pain doesn't mean you're off track. It means you're in process. And if you're in process, you're in purpose. God often builds through brokenness, not around it, not in spite of it, but through it. Because in brokenness, all the masks fall off. The pride, the pretending, the illusion of control, it all shatters. And in that raw, vulnerable place, where you have nothing left to prove and nothing left to hold on to, that's where he begins to build. Not on what you thought you were, but on who he knows you are. Brokenness creates space. It clears the clutter. It makes room for something new to be formed, something real. God doesn't use the polished first. He uses the crushed. Think of the olive. It has to be pressed to release the oil. The pearl formed from irritation. The diamond born in pressure. The vessel molded from clay that's been torn and reshaped. That's how God works. Through the very things we think disqualify us. When you're broken, you stop depending on your strength. You start leaning on grace. You begin to hear God differently. The noise of pride quiets and the whisper of his voice becomes clearer. Brokenness is not a detour from your purpose. It's part of the construction zone. He's digging deep, pouring foundation, setting you up to carry something greater than you ever imagined. Sometimes the breaking is not punishment, it's preparation. You're not being torn down, you're being rebuilt. Stronger, wiser, softer in spirit, but firmer in faith. And what he builds in brokenness, no man can take credit for. Because when you rise from the rubble and people ask, how did you make it? You won't say it was strategy or luck. You'll say it was God. You'll say, he built me in the breaking. And that testimony? That's what changes lives. A woman's scars are not shame. They're stories of survival. They are not signs of weakness, but symbols of strength. Every scar, whether visible on the skin or etched deep in the soul, tells a story. A story of a battle fought, a night endured, a storm weathered. Scars don't mean she was defeated. They mean she lived through something that tried to break her and failed. The world has a way of trying to make women feel like they have to hide their pain, mask their struggles, and present perfection. But true power doesn't come from hiding the scars. It comes from owning them. It comes from standing tall and saying, yes, I've been through it, but I'm still here. Because survival is not just about making it out alive. It's about coming out wiser, stronger, and more compassionate. Scars don't subtract from beauty, they add depth to it. They speak of resilience, of lessons learned in silence, of tears cried in private, of faith that didn't falter even when everything else did. A scar says, I've been hurt, but I've healed. It doesn't erase the past, but it declares that the past does not have the final word. Some scars come from betrayal, some from loss, some from choices made in pain or desperation. But no matter the origin, each one tells the truth, that she did not give up, that she got back up time and time again, and that God was with her in every fall and every rise. Her scars aren't shameful, they're sacred. They are living proof that she is not what happened to her. She is what she overcame. And that survival, that's where her strength lives. That's where her story begins to speak. That being broken is not the end, it's a beginning. It may feel like everything has fallen apart, your plans, your identity, your hope, but what feels like an ending in your eyes is often the very place where God begins his greatest work. Brokenness strips away the noise. It silences the distractions. It brings you face to face with the core of who you are, and more importantly, who God is. And in that sacred shattered space, he begins to rebuild. Not the life you thought you wanted, but the one he destined you for. When you're broken, you see the world differently. You start noticing the small things, the moments of grace, the kindness in a stranger, the breath you almost forgot to be thankful for. Brokenness has a way of humbling you, slowing you down, and opening your heart in ways success never could. It's in the breaking that you learn to lean, to surrender, to listen. And when you're finally still enough to hear his voice, you realize God was never distant. He was right there, holding the pieces. The beginning doesn't always look like progress. It can look like isolation, like sitting in the middle of your pain, not knowing how to move forward. But it's there, in the stillness, in the questions, in the tears, that new roots take hold. Strength starts to rise. Faith begins to grow, not in what you can do, but in what he can do through you. It's easy to think broken means over. But in God's hands, broken becomes beautiful. He doesn't discard what's damaged. He reshapes it. He refines it. And the new thing he creates, it carries more grace, more purpose, more power than anything that came before. Because from the moment of breaking, he starts building again. Stronger, deeper, eternal, you can be wounded and still be chosen. The presence of pain does not cancel the presence of purpose. Life may have bruised you, circumstances may have cut deep, and people may have walked away when you needed them most. But none of that changes the fact that God still calls your name. Being chosen has never been about being perfect. It's always been about being willing. And the wounded, those who've been through something, often carry the kind of strength that can't be faked. God is not afraid of your wounds. He doesn't flinch at your past or walk away from your broken place. In fact, he moves closer. He steps into your pain with healing in his hands, not to erase your story, but to redeem it. Because a woman who has bled and still stands, that woman carries power. She knows how to pray with authority, how to love with depth, how to see with compassion. Her wounds become wisdom. Her battles become blessings. Being chosen doesn't mean your journey is easy. It means your journey has meaning. It means that even when life knocked you down, God saw something in you that was worth lifting back up. He looked past the labels, past the moments you regret, and said, I can use her. Not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Some of the greatest callings are birthed out of the deepest wounds. Because when you've been through the fire and didn't burn out, you carry a light that can guide others. You can lead with empathy, serve with humility, and love with authenticity. Wounds may have slowed you down, but they didn't disqualify you. You're still chosen, still appointed, still anointed. And nothing that hurt you can stop what God has already planned for you. Blessings can be born from the hardest seasons. It's often in the darkest moments, when the struggle feels endless, that the seeds of your greatest blessings are being planted. When you're going through a storm, it's hard to see the light, but every drop of rain, every gust of wind, every moment of uncertainty is preparing the ground for growth. You may not understand it in the midst of the pain, but those seasons of hardship are the very places where God is working behind the scenes to bring something new, something better into your life. Growth doesn't happen in comfort. The strongest roots are grown in the soil of difficulty, and the most beautiful flowers bloom after the harshest winters. It's the pressure that turns coal into diamonds, the fire that refines gold. Without the refining, there's no purity. Without the struggle, there's no strength. And without the hard seasons, there are no blessings to bear witness to. Through the pain, God is shaping you, molding your character, fortifying your faith, and building resilience in your spirit. It's not that the blessings come to replace the hardship, but rather they emerge because of it. The person you are becoming in the process of endurance is the very person who will carry and manage those blessings when they arrive. It's easy to think of blessings only as material things, but the true blessing often lies in the transformation that takes place within you. Your heart expands, your vision broadens, and your gratitude deepens. Those hard seasons create a soil rich enough for blessings to take root and grow in ways you never imagined. What once seemed like a setback is now the foundation for a future filled with purpose, prosperity, and peace. God doesn't need perfect, He needs willing. Perfection is a human ideal, a standard we often set for ourselves based on comparison and expectation. But God isn't looking for flawless, He's looking for availability. He doesn't require that you have it all together or that you figured everything out. What He wants is a heart that's open, a spirit that's ready, and a willingness to step forward in faith, even when you don't know exactly where that step will lead. God calls the imperfect, the broken, the flawed, not to use them because they are perfect, but because they are willing to be used. Your mistakes, your struggles, your weaknesses, they don't disqualify you in His eyes. In fact, they often make you more useful. When you're aware of your own limitations, when you understand that you can't do it on your own, you open the door for God to move through you. It's in your willingness to let go of control that His power can flow through your life. When God calls you to something greater, it's not about your qualifications. It's about your obedience. It's about saying, "Yes, God. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I'm willing to trust you and follow wherever you lead." The power is not in your ability to be perfect. It's in your ability to surrender. When you give God your willingness, He takes it and transforms it into something extraordinary. Throughout history, God has used ordinary, imperfect people to fulfill His plans. He took a stammering Moses, a doubting Thomas, a flawed Peter, and He used them in mighty ways. You don't have to be perfect to do great things for God. You just have to be willing. There's power in the tears you cried in secret, the ones no one saw, the ones you cried into your pillow when the weight was too much, when the silence felt louder than any scream, and your heart couldn't carry the pain any longer. Those tears weren't wasted. They weren't signs of weakness. They were sacred. Every drop held a piece of your struggle, your hope, your prayer, poured out in raw honesty before God who sees what no one else can. The world may never know how many nights you wept while still showing up strong in the daylight, but heaven knows. God was there for every silent sob, every whisper of "I can't do this anymore." Every moment you wiped your own face, stood back up, and kept going. He collected those tears, not as reminders of defeat, but as evidence of a fight that refused to be seen and still kept pressing forward. Tears are not a sign that you're losing. They're a release, a language of the soul that speaks louder than words. And there's power in that release. In those secret cries, something deep was breaking, but something stronger was also being born. A quiet strength, a deeper faith, a trust that can't be shaken because it's been tested in the fire of real, unfiltered pain. God doesn't overlook silent suffering. He honors it. And those tears, they water the soil of purpose. They prepare the ground for something new to grow. Joy doesn't always come quickly, but it will come. And when it does, it will stand on the foundation of those hidden tears, the ones cried in dark rooms behind closed doors with no applause or recognition. That's where power is born. In surrender, in truth, in secret places where healing begins, grace will meet you where guilt tried to keep you. Deep. Guilt is a heavy chain, It whispers that you're not worthy, not enough, too far gone to be forgiven. It keeps playing the same scenes over and over in your mind, making you relive the mistakes, the failures, the moments you wish you could undo. Guilt wants to keep you stuck, replaying the past, too ashamed to step into the future. But grace doesn't wait for you to clean yourself up. Grace steps into the mess. It walks right into the room where guilt has you cornered and says, she's still mine. Where guilt tells you to hide, grace calls you out of the shadows. Where guilt says, you'll never be better, grace whispers, I already paid for that. God's grace is not reserved for the ones who got it right. It's for the ones who know they got it wrong, but still dare to reach for him anyway. And the moment you think he's too far, too holy, too perfect to love someone like you, that's when grace shows up the strongest. Grace doesn't deny the past and it just refuses to let it define you. It picks you up off the floor, wipes your face, and tells you, you are not what you did. You are who I say you are. And what God says is final. Not guilt, not shame, not regret. Grace takes the very place where guilt tried to bury you and turns it into the ground where redemption grows. You don't have to earn it. You just have to receive it. And once you do, guilt loses its grip. It has no authority in the presence of grace. Because grace isn't just a second chance, it's a new identity. It doesn't just forgive, it restores. It brings you back to life. The valley shaped the woman more than the mountaintop ever could. It was in the low places, in the quiet, lonely stretches of life where she discovered what she was truly made of. The mountaintop may be where we celebrate, but the valley is where we're transformed. It's where her prayers got real, where her strength was tested, and where her faith was forged. She didn't just walk through the valley. She was carved by it, molded by every tear, every unanswered question, every long night when the breakthrough didn't come. In the valley, she learned how to stand when everything around her was falling apart. She learned how to hear God in the silence, how to keep moving when there was no visible path, and how to believe when nothing made sense. The valley taught her endurance. It taught her the difference between hype and hope. It stripped away the noise and left only what was essential. Her raw, honest heart and a God who never left her side. Mountaintops may get the spotlight, but valleys build the substance. That's where character grows, where humility settles in, where compassion deepens. She came out of the valley with a different kind of power. Not loud, not flashy, but rooted, unshakable. She walks differently now, not because she's never been broken, but because she has. And she survived. The valley gave her vision. It taught her to look deeper, to appreciate the little things, to find joy in the midst of struggle. It refined her, not to break her down, but to prepare her for something greater. While the mountaintop offered the view, it was the valley that gave her the tools to climb. And now every step she takes carries the quiet strength of a woman who's been through the low places and came out stronger. Now your faith didn't break when you did, it carried you. In the moments when your world came crashing down, when your voice trembled from crying out in the dark, when you felt like you had nothing left to give, faith was still there. Maybe it didn't roar, maybe it whispered, maybe it felt small and fragile, but it was present. And that presence, even in its quietest form, was power. You thought you were holding on to faith, but the truth is, faith was holding on to you. Even when your prayers felt empty, even when doubt tried to drown your hope, there was something deep inside you that kept believing. Not because you had all the answers, not because you saw the way out, but because faith doesn't depend on feelings, it rests on truth. And the truth is, God never let go. You broke, but your faith didn't. It bent, it wavered, it cracked under the weight of life, but it didn't collapse. It carried you through the sleepless nights, the aching silence, the storms that seemed to have no end. It reminded you, sometimes gently, sometimes fiercely, that you were never alone. That even in your weakest moment, you were still surrounded by grace. Faith isn't always loud. It doesn't always look like bold declarations or unshakable confidence. Sometimes it looks like getting out of bed. Sometimes it looks like whispering a God, help me, when that's all you can manage. Sometimes it looks like tears on the bathroom floor with a heart still reaching for heaven. And somehow, through all of that, your faith didn't just survive. It strengthened. It matured. It became more real. Because when everything else broke, faith became the bridge that carried you from brokenness to becoming, from despair to endurance, from barely breathing to rising again. God uses broken vessels to pour the most powerful. The cracks, the chips, the shattered places we try to hide, those are the very places where his presence flows the deepest. We think we need to be whole, polished, and put together for God to use us. But God looks at the broken pieces and says, now I can work. Because a vessel that's been broken knows what it means to need grace. It knows what it feels like to fall and be lifted. And that kind of vessel doesn't just carry the oil. It pours it with compassion, humility, and power. There's a reason God often chooses the least expected. He doesn't pour his anointing into prideful perfection. He pours it into surrender, into those who know they can't do it on their own, into those who've been through something and came out the other side not bitter, but better. Brokenness makes space for the supernatural. When your strength runs out, his steps in. When your plan fails, his purpose prevails. Oil, in the Word of God, represents anointing, healing, power, and sanctification. And when it flows from a broken vessel, it reaches places untouched by surface-level strength. That oil is deeper, richer, because it's been pressed through pain, crushed by disappointment, refined through trial, and now it flows not from performance, but from presence. A woman who's been broken doesn't minister from theory. She ministers from testimony. Her words carry weight. Her hands bring healing. Her spirit carries oil that didn't come cheap. It was paid for in sleepless nights, in prayers whispered through tears, in battles fought behind closed doors. And that kind of oil, it changes rooms. It breaks yokes. It sets captives free. Because God doesn't waste brokenness. He fills it, blesses it, and pours power through it. Even when you were done, God wasn't. You reached the end of your strength, your patience, your hope, and you said, I'm finished. But God looked at you with eyes full of mercy and whispered, I'm just getting started. He doesn't stop when you stop. He doesn't walk away when you collapse. He's the kind of God who steps into your giving up and says, let me carry you now. There were moments you thought it was over. Moments when the pain was louder than the promise. Moments when you stared at the ceiling numb and wondered if he even heard you anymore. But God never left. He wasn't waiting on your perfection. He was present in your exhaustion. While you were breaking, he was building. While you were letting go, he was holding on. It's okay that you were done. That moment of surrender wasn't weakness. It was the turning point. That's when he stepped in with his grace, his strength, his plan that had always been in motion even when you couldn't see it. Because God doesn't need you to have it all together to move. He just needs a heart that's open, even if it's barely beating. You thought the end of your rope meant the end of the story. But God sees beyond the last chapter you wrote. He's the author, and he's not done writing. What looked like defeat to you was just a pause in the plot. What felt like failure was fertile ground for a new beginning. God specializes in resurrection, in bringing beauty from ashes, in breathing life back into dry bones and worn-out dreams. You may have been done, but God wasn't done with you, your calling, your healing, or your story. And because of that, the ending you feared isn't the ending he's planned. Redemption isn't a someday thing. It's already started. It doesn't wait for you to feel ready or worthy. It doesn't sit in the future far off and out of reach. The moment you turned your heart toward God, even if it was broken, even if it was unsure, even if all you could manage was a whisper of a help, redemption began moving, not later, not someday, right then. Because God doesn't wait to love you until you've cleaned yourself up. He loves you in the middle of the mess and starts working while the pieces are still scattered. You might not see the full picture yet. You might still be standing in the rubble of what was. But God is already laying the foundation for what will be. Every step you've taken out of the pain, every truth you've dared to believe again, every lie you've begun to let go of, that's redemption in motion. It's not just a one-time event. It's a process, a rebuilding, a reclaiming of everything that tried to break you. Redemption is quiet sometimes. It shows up in healed thoughts, in new choices, in peace where there used to be panic. It shows up in forgiveness you never thought you'd give, in courage you didn't know you had. God's redemptive power doesn't just restore you. It rewrites your story. It takes what was meant to destroy you and turns it into something that will deliver others. You don't have to wait until everything is perfect to say, redemption is real. It's happening now in the courage to keep going, in the strength to show up, in the faith to believe that what's ahead is greater than what's behind. God already started the work, and if he started it, he'll finish it, not someday, but step by step, starting now. Your story is not over. It's a testimony still being written. You may have walked through chapters filled with pain, disappointment, and silence, but that's not where your story ends. The ink hasn't dried. The author hasn't put down his pen. What felt like a final period was just a pause, a breath before the next line, the next breakthrough, the next miracle. God doesn't write unfinished stories, and he certainly doesn't abandon his characters in the middle of their struggle. You are still here, and that means something. It means there is more to come, more strength, more healing, more grace, more purpose. The tears you cried, the battles you fought, the nights you barely made it through, none of it was in vain. Every moment is being woven into a testimony that will one day speak of survival, of hope that held on, of faith that didn't quit even when it was hanging by a thread. Sometimes it's hard to see the purpose while you're still in the process. But even now, in the waiting, in the questions, in the rebuilding, God is writing. He's turning your pain into paragraphs of redemption, your mess into messages of encouragement for someone else. The places you thought would be your ending are becoming altars of new beginnings. Don't count yourself out because of what's behind you. What's ahead still holds promises you haven't seen yet, joy you haven't felt yet, and strength you haven't tapped into yet. You are not a finished chapter. You are a living, breathing testimony in progress. And every step forward, no matter how small, is proof that God is still writing. Let him keep going, because when he writes the story, the ending is always greater than the struggle that came before it.